Hi everyone, my name is Terry. Sorry if I just blasted you with my voice. I'm on the marketing team here at Classy, and I am really excited to introduce this panel, or conversation actually, between Shanna Birky, who is a product manager at Classy, and Carrie Pena, who is the chief marketing officer at buildOn, which is one of our Classy clients. So Shanna has been with Classy for 10 years. She has done an excellent job diving into fundraising, articulating impact, running experiments, and now working on the product team, so building the Classy product. And then Carrie has been at buildOn for 11 years and previously headed up fundraising for their Midwest region. So obviously she has a ton of experience with the organization as well as fundraising. So you may have heard in the keynote yesterday that Classy fundraised to build a school in Nepal for buildOn. And during that time, Shanna actually conducted a bunch of experiments to understand what motivates fundraisers. Do they know why they give? Do they know what happens with the money that they raise? And so Carrie and Shanna learned a ton from this experience, and this is what the conversation is about. And I really hope that you're able to take away some of these ideas for your own organization and feel empowered to dive into experimentation, because anyone can really do this and gain a lot of value from these things. So with that, I want to hand it over to Shanna and Carrie. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Terry. Thanks, Terry. Hi, everyone. Ooh, that's like real loud. Yeah, so as Terry was mentioning, I took the liberty to run 3 experiments while we were fundraising for buildOn. And the goal of why I really wanted to do these experiments actually changed throughout the process of experimenting. So my original goal was to actually find out if there was a correlation between impact, communicating impact to fundraisers, or communicating impact to donors. And again, originally I thought that that was what it was going to be all about. And when I really started to dive into things, especially our initial experiment, I actually found that that wasn't the case, and that I really needed to dive in to better understand how buildOn understood their fundraisers. And so we're going to talk through the 3 experiments, and I just really appreciate Carrie being here. This is a little bit of a vulnerable topic because it really dives into, what happens if you do or if you don't know your fundraisers. And so, yeah, we're going to get started. First of all, I would like to know, and I should have asked this a while ago, but how did you feel that I had come to you guys in a different way and had let you know that I was going to run these experiments during a campaign?
Yeah, so I think I was surprised at first. I was like, because we got on the phone and you were like, guess what? I ran some experiments on your fundraiser, and I was like, okay, cool. But I shouldn't have been surprised because you guys are so focused on data and impact, improving ROI. Like, of course you guys were doing that. And when we had the conversation, I was just like, this is amazing, because I had been having so many of the same conversations within our organization about how to measure this stuff, find out more about our fundraisers, and improve giving through crowd raising. So I was like really excited.
Awesome. And just to kind of give a little reference, what does fundraising actually look like for buildOn?
Yeah, so fundraising at buildOn has really shifted over what I would say the last 3 to 5 years. We used to be very heavily special events based. We have a very strong corporate base. And they supported our special events, and that raised about probably 60% of our funding. And over the last 5 years, since we've engaged with Classy, a lot of our fundraising has shifted to crowd raising, but specifically around what we call immersions, which is the opportunity for people to raise money for our programs and travel to build schools in the developing countries where we work, or to come to our US communities and serve alongside our students in the communities where they're doing their service learning programs. And so corporations fund us that way, but also a large portion of it is crowd raising. And when we first started with crowd raising, it was primarily college students and private high school students. So we were going into affluent communities or affluent colleges getting people really jazzed about the mission, and then they were coming back and crowd raising to build schools. And then over the last 3 years, it's shifted to be like so many more different types of people crowd raising for us, specifically corporations and organizations. And so we've seen a lot of change.
Awesome. Yeah, and so the biggest change for you guys, did that include when you guys were going through that change, did that include looking at kind of the data that was being collected or how fundraisers were interacting with you guys?
Yeah, so not really, right?
All right.
Because, we had a really strong model in how we got students to crowd raise for us.
Okay.
And we had this donor base of corporate donors who we thought we understood really well. Mm-hmm. And so we were analyzing what our students were doing, which we call our community teams model. So we were analyzing that, but then there was this whole other demographic of people. And as you all know, working in the nonprofit sector, it's like you're constantly thinking about like, what's the new way to raise money? What's the next thing on my plate? And it's really hard to stop and analyze what you're doing and then take a look at your database to say like, what does it look like now? Like I had a really clear picture of what it looked like 3 years ago, but like who are these people actually now? Mm-hmm. And I just did an analysis of we track our database growth, but over the last 3 years, it has doubled in size. And so we really had to figure out, we really hadn't taken the time to figure out what that new growth looked like and type of demographic and interest.
Cool. So that's a perfect segue into really the experimentation. So like I mentioned in the beginning, my goal was to really understand impact. And did impact ever really help drive donations or even just fundraiser engagement? So again, my initial experiment, the first one that I ran, basically took our fundraisers, we split them up into 2 groups, and gave one set of fundraisers a certain template and the second set of fundraisers a different template. Template A included information about impact, and template B did not include information about impact. What I was trying to do was to see if a donor would donate again to that same fundraiser based off impact. So what we actually found was the answer was yes in some cases. 21% of donors donated again, but it actually did not matter which template they sent. So it really reinforced the fact that people donate to people, and that the impact piece of it I think was beneficial, but it didn't necessarily make a dramatic difference in whether or not somebody was donating again. The biggest lesson we actually learned from that experiment was the fact that people felt uncomfortable asking again. So we created these templates, we created the emails, we basically gave them a turnkey to drive more donations, and they simply just didn't feel comfortable asking again. So for us, I think that was a really big lesson learned, that although in some cases some people can do it well, others won't, and you shouldn't force the fundraiser to do that. And so as we started to survey, even after this experiment, we realized that the fundraiser didn't know how to talk about buildOn and didn't know how to describe buildOn. So that is really where my second experiment came in and kind of where things shifted. And I think that's important. Anytime you go into an experimentation process, you're there to learn. And if you learn something, it's okay to pivot. And so we actually did. But before I dive into experiment number 2, did you find anything surprising about that initial experiment?
Yes. So obviously, like if you ask for money again, the chances of you getting another gift are greatly increased. I think I was surprised by such the high resistance to doing it, mm-hmm. and whether or not impact really influenced that. Mm-hmm. Because we really think about how do we get, if Joe is raising money to build a school in Nepal, how do we get his donors to give buildOn another gift, whether that is to Joe's campaign or in the long term. And you think that that's going to be about impact, but really it's about learning that it's about that relationship they have with the donor, which seems obvious because that's why crowd raising works. But giving people the tools is a shift we've made now, because we weren't even asking them to ask again. We weren't providing them with any tools to ask again. So that's a shift we've made for all of our crowd raisers now. But I think we're still trying to prove the impact, because it is a goal of ours. Like, if we're doing all of this crowd raising and we're filling our database with people who have given to us through crowd raisers, we're still trying to get those people to make the connection to the organization, through their friends. So it becomes slightly more about the mission rather than just their niece who asked for money.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you did actually incorporate some of a lesson learned through that. That's
Absolutely.
awesome.
Yeah.
Sweet. So I did think about whether or not I should run the second experiment, just because I knew it would provide a little bit vulnerability. It could prove some things wrong, and I wanted to be sensitive, but I also was pretty interested in the response. So I ended up running a survey with all of our fundraisers, and we're talking about 100 people. So we got all of our fundraisers in a room, and I really just had an open conversation with them that also included a survey. And it was an 8-question survey. We'll go through it so you guys can utilize perhaps some of the things on your own. But I then asked Carrie, the survey, to see if she really understood kind of where her fundraisers were coming from. So we're gonna go through the survey questions. We could have put them on slides, but that's okay. If you have further questions, we can always go into them after. But I'm going to start off just kind of listing out the questions that we asked our fundraisers. And again, it was to really understand, what is that connection? What is the current connection between the fundraiser and buildOn? So let's dive in, and apologies, but there we are. Okay. So the first question I asked is, why are you fundraising? And all the questions were actually multiple choice. I really wanted to understand what was the motivation as to why somebody was fundraising. And I wanted to see how many people were willing to respond, as well as if they were giving me multiple responses. So the overwhelming answer was that they wanted to give more responses. So they wanted to list out multiple ways of why they were doing this. But for the most part, they actually did this because it provided more community within Classy. So they really liked that they were doing this with other people, other coworkers of theirs in Classy. It was something that they could really get behind. The second question I asked is, what incentives drive you to fundraise and reach your goal? And I was kind of surprised at this, but in the end, I'm like, well, of course, why didn't I think of that? But again, it was a multiple choice. We really didn't see very much variance in people wanting to select more than one. People knew what they were fundraising for. And for the most part, it really came down to 2 things. One, PTO. So if you fundraised a certain amount, we actually gave you a day off, fully paid, which is nice. But the second piece, or the second response that we got as well, was that they wanted to go on a trip to Nepal. Something to mention in that question is we did ask about impact. We did ask things that related directly to the mission of what buildOn was doing. And yes, there definitely was some, but it did not kind of outweigh what was happening on the PTO or incentive side. But people were really willing to just give us that answer, and I think that was an important takeaway. The third question we asked is, do you know buildOn's mission? And it kind of hurt my heart because the answer was no. And it was a solid no. About 70% said no. And so in some cases, I think that they may have understood kind of the theme of what you do, but not necessarily maybe the major mission of what was happening. So for me, that kind of sparked, well, there's got to be a correlation there. There has to be a reason that it may be difficult to fundraise if you don't really know what you're fundraising for. Which led me into my fourth question. Have you or will you increase your fundraising goal? And 100% the answer was yes. People were all willing to increase their fundraising goal. And I think that's really important, or they had ambitions to actually do it, or if they've done it already. The fifth question, how do you want to be celebrated once you have reached your goal? And this, I think, is often forgotten about. And I actually was, again, surprised by the survey response. And they actually wanted to be celebrated by buildOn. They wanted it to be a personal email that came from buildOn. They didn't want it to be, some really big, exciting thing that Classy did for them, even though it was within the Classy community of why they were fundraising. But they really wanted to be recognized by the organization that they were fundraising for. Let's see, number 6, do you know how your fundraising efforts will impact buildOn? And we got kind of a mixed response. So it was interesting because I think people understood the theme of what you do, but responded no to not knowing your mission, but kind of understood why they were fundraising. Right. Which, again, I think it was a little bit of a mixed bag in that, but people knew, even though they didn't understand maybe your full mission, they were still there for a reason. Number 7, do you wish you knew more about the impact of your fundraising efforts? 100% said yes. So what that kind of showed us is maybe there needed to be a little bit more transparency in what was actually going to happen with the money that they were raising. Then after that, which was great, and I so appreciated everyone's willingness to be involved. I didn't have to beg or plead. People wanted to give me this information. And I would say that's a really important aspect because people want to give you this information. Your fundraisers want to be able to tell you the different things, why they're doing things, how they want to be incentivized, what it looks like to reach their goal. And it's okay to ask, and I think that's really important. So I asked two follow-up questions after I did this in-person survey. And only about half actually responded. So I had a much higher responding rate because people were in front of me than the survey that I sent, the 2-question survey I sent out after. So how can buildOn help you more in the process? And the overwhelming response, again, we gave multiple, was to just interact and communicate more with them based around why they were fundraising. So it wasn't just like, hey, how are you doing? It more so was a little bit targeted to what their fundraising efforts were actually doing for the buildOn organization. And then the second question that I asked in that survey is, do you want them to contact you in the future? And the answer was yes. So with those questions, we really had a great takeaway. I knew a lot more about those fundraisers than I was really anticipating. So I turned the tables and I asked Carrie all of those questions. And I asked her to basically see if she was on pace with all of her fundraisers. And unfortunately, the answer was no. Carrie got 2 out of the 8 questions correct. And again, my applause to you for sitting up here for allowing me to say that. But it was important. It was an important piece of the puzzle that there was this disconnect. And 2 of the questions that you got were on impact. So I think you kind of knew where we were going with things. But I would, kind of turn it over to you now. Yeah. And really let you kind of explain some of those results and what they've done for you guys.
Yeah. So, I think that we go through our day-to-day really thinking that we know our donors and we think that they're there because of the mission, right? But we really don't know how, unless we're constantly measuring and asking the question, we don't know how well our message is penetrating the groups that we're reaching. And I think this is a very specific case that's really applicable to buildOn. So we work very heavily with corporations like GE, Deutsche Bank, Synchrony Financial, who CEOs sign on with buildOn and our mission, right? And then they go out to their employees and say, we want you to get involved, we want you to fundraise and go build a school, but that's where the information stops. And we haven't built a communication stream then further past the CEO level contact at these corporations. So we have all these people fundraising for us who don't really know what we're doing, who we are, what impact they're directly having. And I think we knew that a large reason why people fundraise for us in this instance is because they want to go build a school, right? It's really fun. It's pretty sexy. Like, you get to travel to Malawi or Nepal or Nicaragua, live in a village for 2 weeks, and work side by side with communities to construct a school. Like, who wouldn't want to do that? But like, really understanding the issues and the impact and all of that goes behind it just wasn't happening. So I think that was a huge takeaway for us. And what we've done now is created like a really automated and personal process. So it's like side by side, where our development team is reaching out to each individual fundraiser on a really targeted schedule. And then also from the marketing team, we have automated emails going out saying, like, oh, you're halfway towards your goal. We just want to let you know that we're in the process of selecting your village. Or you're 75% towards your goal. We've selected your village, and this is the village, you know, and here's the need, and here's a story of a student. And then after the fact, like, continuing that conversation.
Awesome.
I also think that the PTO thing was really eye-opening for us, right? Because again, like I said, we're always assuming that our mission and our impact is the motivating factor. And at the end of the day, we want everybody to be there for that, but we need the money to do our work. And so if we can convince a corporation to offer a PTO day as an incentive, and then pull people along in the mission, but get that initial thing that may not be tied to our mission. And you had other incentives too, like iPads and like swag and stuff like that, and that didn't matter to people. So I think that was a really interesting thing, and we've taken that to other companies as well, like Rodan & Fields, which is a international skincare company, one of our biggest donors. They're raising money to go build schools with us, and also raising money to have experiences with our US programs. And they did the same thing. Based on that piece of information, offered a PTO day and was able to raise a lot of money for buildOn, which was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if I didn't do the experiments, right, and you were doing them, what hurdles do you think you may have run into?
Yeah, I mean, so we sent out a survey.
That's right.
Yeah, we sent out a survey around the same time that Classy was concluding their fundraising. And that is something that had been on our like strategic plan for the last year and a half.
Oh.
Right? And it was just like something that didn't happen, because it's really easy for us to get, like I said, caught in the day-to-day of like, we've got to bring the money in and we have all these other marketing initiatives. And so when Shanna was like, I ran this experiment for you and I have all this really useful data and it has tangible results, it was really easy for me to then go to my team and say like, look, we've been putting this off, but we just have to get it done, because this is like really tangible and useful stuff, and we don't know our donors. And just some stats from that survey that I found really surprising. So 24% of all of our donors 24% of all of our donors had heard about us from their corporation. So that's a quarter of the donors who responded to the email, which we had a really big response rate. I think it was over 30% of our database, which is really big.
Yeah.
24% of them had heard of us from their corporation, which meant that they weren't getting direct messages from us, except like in our regular email stream, which people don't, emails, 12% open rate, right? So 58% of our donors had only heard about us in the last 3 years, and 30% of those in the last 12 months. And so this is how fast our database is growing, and largely due to crowd raising. Mm-hmm. And when your database grows that fast, if you don't take the time to then figure out who's in that database, you can't market to them, you can't communicate with them, and you're really doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah.
And then only 30% said that they had a good grasp of what buildOn's mission is. And, I think that hurts my heart as a marketer. But also, buildOn's mission is pretty complicated, and it's something that we work out because we have both international and US programs, but it's something that we know that we have to constantly work at and try to break through that bubble and test new technologies and test new streams and do a lot of A/B testing to see like how we're gonna penetrate people with our message, because what we're doing currently is just not getting the job done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think the big takeaway was from that? From me running the experiments to you going in and doing your own survey, what do you think the big takeaway was?
The big takeaway for me was like, you have to slow down and do the experimentation. You have to slow down and do the surveys. One of the things we are implementing, because we use Salesforce as our database, we're going to be implementing Get Feedback. Cool. So we can do constant, like just small little check-ins, little surveys based on like different experiences, on whether or not we're supporting you as a fundraiser, on how we can do better in terms of educating you about our mission. Because we just don't have the information, and we want that all tied into, you know, our Salesforce, you know, database, so we can tell who are going to be our word of mouth promoters, who knows about us, who doesn't know about us. But you have to slow down to do that, right? And I feel like so often, at least in my organization, I'm sure it's with you guys, but like we're constantly trying to innovate. And like I said, like in the last 3 to 5 years, our crowd raising has taken off. Our shift from special event marketing into immersions is taking off. And we've been trying so hard to figure out how to get that right, that we aren't getting it right because we don't slow down to find out, you know, what the reality is or what the data is.
Awesome. So I think for me, one of the major takeaways was that it's okay to ask questions.
Yeah.
And whether the process is actually before or during or after, it's okay to ask questions, and people actually want to give you the information. Is there any advice besides slowing down if somebody were to conduct surveys or conduct experiments that you would want to be able to pass on?
I guess it's what you said earlier about pivoting, right? Because it's okay to change what you're doing. And I think that we all get in our habits and we know what has worked in the past, and you know, we get really traditional, like especially when you have an organization where a lot of people have been there a long time, like I have been there for 11 years. And something that's worked in the past doesn't mean it's going to work in the future. And you have to take risks after you learn new information and you gather the data to change your strategy, because things change and stuff stops working.
Yeah. And I think another thing is assumptions, and assumptions can kill.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, you know, a lot of the conversations I have when I will question something, it's often based off of an assumption that I'm kind of hearing from that organization on their fundraisers. So assumptions can be a killer, because you can just continue that same conversation or that same interaction. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to evaluate and experiment during this process. It was eye-opening for us as a fundraising platform to learn more about fundraisers. And I think for us, in order to continue growing and becoming one of the best solutions out there, we have to listen to fundraisers, we have to listen to donors in the same way that you have to listen to your fundraisers and you have to listen to your donors. So again, I thank you so much. Do you have anything else to add?
No, just okay. I really appreciate it. Cool. I mean, like I feel like at buildOn we're always trying to be transparent, and we work to go beyond transparency. We like to say beyond transparency into solidarity, which is why we do so many immersions. And like with our programs, we want people in the field to see what we're actually doing. And so for us to be able to do the same thing on the marketing and the fundraising side and just be like, this is what it is, like let's not hide behind what we assume is happening, is really important. So I want to thank you for that.
Oh, thanks. I feel like a proud parent.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it worked. Awesome. Well, thank you again. Thank you all. I think we have time to take some questions. So Terry, if you want to help out with that.
You said 21% of your people would give again or ask for someone else to give again to a campaign. Do you know anything about those people, what they might have in common, how you might identify who to go ask to ask again?
So 21% of donors donated again. Yeah, so the fundraisers, it was, oops, I almost fell off there. It was interesting because I think a few of the fundraisers were very open to doing this, and many of them weren't, and so it took a little convincing. As far as those specific donors go, they were donating to that person again. It was the personal connection. Rachel and Brooke, who's also here at the collaborative, they did this, and they were a great result of my experiment. And in fact, when I was so thankful that they were willing to do it, because it is right off the bat showed and proved that you can ask for a donation twice. But I think it depended on the fundraiser, it depended on how familiar they were. They both, I would suggest everyone could pick their brains and ask them why they felt comfortable to do so, and it could be the cause, it could be the impact. I don't know if you have anything. Rachel, this is one of the fundraisers who actually did this. Do you have why did you do it?
So having the background and the fundraising knowledge, it's second nature to me to think like, oh, these people are most likely to give because they already gave. So making other people feel comfortable with that knowledge who might not just naturally have it. So I think taking some of those best practices from your top fundraisers and sharing them with your inactive fundraisers or those who are pacing a little bit behind and just sharing that knowledge.
Awesome. Sweet.
First question was your 8th question the 2-part question? Okay. That was the first thing because I was confused with that. That's
Sorry, it was 8A and 8B.
That's what I put down, but I just want to make sure
Okay,
that's correct. The other is, do you find that the donors that repeat, and I agree with you, I think if they believe in the cause, they may have given to the person the first time, but they believe in the cause, and that comes from our end to educate them on the cause. But do you find that of that 21% that gave it, were they thanked and thanked and thanked again? Because that's one of the biggest things I say to our donors through our Classy platform is that there's 4 opportunities to thank them. The ones initially done immediately because of the platform.
Yeah.
But then there's the opportunity, especially when you're on a team, there's an opportunity for the person, the team leader, and then us again as the initiative. Mm-hmm. And if we're not all thanking them, we're losing the potential of them giving again.
Yeah, I think we both could actually answer that because that is one of the things that I had asked Carrie was, so what are you going to do with all these new donors? You know, what's your communication strategy look like? How are you going to treat them differently? We know on our own platform that donors who give to fundraisers don't often return. In fact, they hardly ever return. And so the opportunity for you to actually communicate to that donor, I talked about it a little bit yesterday, it's a hot lead. They're already there, they're already partially engaged, but this would be a great opportunity for you to empower that fundraiser to then reach out again and thank them again. Or if it was part of a program, to after that program was complete, that Rachel or somebody else went ahead and sent pictures to all of her donors. And then buildOn followed up with, hey, just so you know, your donation did do this, and here's a picture of what we built. Here's the school. So I think there's a really great opportunity for those donors specifically, the 21% that even donated again to the campaign, to reach out and really engage with them in a way that either comes from a fundraiser, sorry, I keep pointing at you, I don't mean to do that, a fundraiser, or from your organization themselves. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've really taken that to heart. So like when someone makes a gift, they get thanked by their fundraiser, they get thanked by the organization. Like I said, I'm just gonna use the Trek as an example where people go to build the schools. Then when we select the village, they get another thank you and another update. They get an email when their team, so like if your niece is raising money to build a school, you'll get an email to say, your niece landed in Malawi, like she's building the school. And then when she gets back, we have construction updates. And we used to only give those to the fundraiser, and now we're going to be giving them, and in some cases have given them to the donors as well. Because we were relying on the fundraiser to do that work for us, but we know that we want them to do it too, but we know that we can't rely on them to do it as well.
Yeah.
We've also are providing, we have a photographer in the field with every trip that goes, and so we'll have a set of photographs that then go out to the fundraiser and to their supporters of the entire experience that's then consolidated into a video. So it's like become a whole program now. We've actually hired a loyalty marketing coordinator. So I have a new person on my team. It's a position we posted in February, which is like right around the same time as our conversation, right? I think prompted by our conversation. So we hired a loyalty marketing coordinator whose only job is to build those systems and to make sure they're working and to make sure that we have the systems in the field and on the ground to collect the stories and collect the impact, make sure it gets out.
Yay!
Yay!
That'd be a fun position.
I know, right? It's just thinking people.
Wow.
I'm curious for your fundraiser specifically, since it sounds like a lot of the motivation is the activity that comes at the end of fundraising. What engagement and cultivation strategies have you found are successful to re-engage fundraisers to fundraise again after they've already had that experience of building a school?
Yeah, so for us, I mean, in most cases, and this is something we could probably study even more, but what we found is that the Trek experience is crazy transformational, and that people, when they come back, that ambiguity about what we do in the field, for the most part, is dissipated. And so we're working on ways to encourage them to become advocates for the organization, to spread word of mouth. We have other activities and programs that they can engage in where they can have similar experiences here in the US. And so on the corporate side, and we're testing this right now with GE, we have a very specific route. So like you come back from track, then you go and you join a junior board that's made up of other companies that you want to do business with, and then those companies go on to do another program that we have that's an immersion, and then it's like we built a whole pathway for it. And then additionally, we have like an email stream that we put people on once they've completed a process. Then they have an email stream that continues to educate them about different parts of our organization.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's something important to remember because we've seen that there's a big drop off with fundraisers, especially year over year, and so a lot of different ideas go into figuring out how to drive that churn number down, and I think it's a great experiment.
Yeah.
Anybody want? No, I'm just kidding. Can I test your fundraisers? But I knowing and understanding churn rates just over our overall platform, I think it's an important thing that we really look into next. So.
Any more questions? Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Carrie and Shanna. This was awesome. So I really appreciate you being here. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.